Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today here at FFG Live. Very excited to be back with Danny and Jim. As you know from last time, Danny is our lead developer for Star Wars Unlimited. Lead designer. Lead designer.
Yeah.
See, I can't get my own right. I have to screw somebody else's up. And Jim, this is the one I was worried about screwing up, is our VP of Strategy, which you may notice has changed just a little bit since last time.
Nobody here cares about that. It's fine.
It's just a little different. And I am still doing what I do, which I think it's organized play program manager or something like that. I don't remember. It's tough to keep track of that mouthful. But we're back. We're excited to be talking to you about, some information we dropped this morning, the Quickstart rules. But before we get into that, we've got a couple housekeeping things we just want to talk about right out the top of the live stream. So we're going to start by just talking. Last time we talked a little bit about, seeing all the feedback that we got after the announce and following the social media channels that we have and Discord and Reddit and everything that's been out there. And we still are doing that and love it. We're loving all of the feedback from you guys. But what I want to do is kind of put these two on the spot and ask them what their favorite thing that they've seen has been so far. And I'm asking them, I'm not going to do it to myself. So Danny.
Of course.
Oh, that's not fair, John.
No, I think it's fair. I'm the host. I do what I want. So,
I'd say
what
my
have you seen?
favorite thing from the community, just because it's such a card game player thing, is that they have less than 10% of the card pool, and they're already ranking which are the most powerful cards, which are the least powerful, which are totally useless.
You gotta have a tier list.
Absolutely.
And I love it because I know I would do exactly the same thing if it were in their shoes. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, tier lists are great, but
I love tier lists,
as
yeah.
we continue to drop content, we'll just see how those tier lists evolve.
I'm sure they won't change at all.
Oh, no.
They'll all stay the same.
Every
Yes.
spoiler season fan analysis is always 100% accurate.
Yep.
It's the one thing I've learned from card games.
We should talk about that later. I have never learned that, but I'm clearly missing something. All right, so Jim, what about yourself?
I will tell you, I have had a ton of fun watching all of the content creation that people have made. I have tried to watch or listen to everything that we have put out thus far, or that you all have put out thus far. And I will say, I think one of my favorite points is whenever in one of those fan-created content videos or podcasts, when someone goes, and I bet you FFG you'll never hear this, and I chuckle a little bit every time. So please continue with the amazing content, and I've really been so excited to see everyone's reaction to what we're doing, and it's so cool to see people talk about the game.
Yeah.
It is. And I'm glad that you just talked about our influencers, people that, are already making content for the game.
Yeah.
Because we, if you haven't seen from last week, we have started working with some influencers. And we're very excited to be doing that because we love these communities that are building up around this game that's not even out yet. And love seeing how people are interacting with it. And we want to interact with them. We want to make sure that they're getting exciting content to put out there. So like I said, we just started recently, but this is something we're going to continue to do through the life of this game. And we're very excited to be working with all of these individuals and letting them get some exciting things alongside what we get to talk about. So it's very exciting for us and hopefully exciting for them and for you, right? We want to give you more channels to get more information.
Yes, it turns out when you have so many cards to spoil, it's great to share that around.
Yes, it is. And there's one thing that I need to backtrack on. I focused on it very heavily during the last live stream, and we just need to clarify something. We were talking about the 2024 global release. I'm going to add one word to it so that everybody can stop speculating what we meant by that as we were saying it. But it is a 2024 simultaneous global release.
Yes.
So just want to make that very, very clear to everybody. We know there's been some guesses as to what that could mean, but we are launching this game globally at the same time.
Yes.
Next year. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So just wanted to clarify that. Now, let's talk about some of the things that, for those of you who have already looked at the Quickstart rules this morning, you may have already seen, but let's start actually talking about this content and what's in the Quickstart rules. And first and foremost, I want to talk about the thing that I've seen the most chatter about in the community is the resource system. So tell me a little bit about the resource system, why it is the way it is, and then we'll talk, as we get later in the chat about when it comes into play and all that.
For sure, yeah. And this is one of the things in R&D, Jim, that we probably spent the most time and the most different iterations on. But ultimately what we settled on is you take a card from your hand, put it into play face down as a resource that can pay for any of your cards. And you start with 2 in play is the other big thing we settled on after a lot of testing.
The idea of whether we wanted to, we went through so many different iterations, but it felt good to look at the way that it kind of played out. One resource in play at the start felt light. It felt like we weren't getting into the, Star Wars starts in the middle of an action sequence, right? Yeah. So many of the Star Wars experiences are that way. It felt like, no, let's get us a little bit further in. You're a little bit further into the game than just starting with a single resource.
Yeah, you kind of, when it started at 1, it felt like that first turn was always just a setup turn. Nothing really happened. And starting at 2 really gets you into the action right away. And then I guess philosophically, the other thing that we really liked about the way the resources work, where you're putting down 1 every round, is that things build up over time. You start out with your little small units, not much happening, at least in terms of swinging your base health. But then as the game goes on, you build up to these big, exciting, massive plays. Later in the game, you're playing Star Destroyers and things. So we really love that feeling.
Spoilers. I don't think we've talked about Star Destroyers.
I mean, they've seen pictures of it, so, right, it's in the art.
Sure.
Maybe... Shoot.
Live streams.
Gotta love them.
And another big philosophical thing we wanted is we didn't want your resources to be something you had to draw, that you could miss out on your resources. We wanted you to always have the option to build your resources turn after turn after turn. Not have that bad feeling of, I didn't draw my resources, I'm stuck and I can't play my cards. That's always a bad feeling, and we wanted the method that played better.
Yeah, we tried. There was that. We had one where it was you would draw a card to hand and then just top deck a resource into play without sight. That one didn't blend.
We really spent a lot of time in R&D on so many variations and just seeing like what felt good to players. And it turns out it feels bad to have your best card go into play as a resource with nothing you can do about it.
You actually bring up a great point. I think another kind of philosophical high-level thing that we attempted to do quite often whenever we looked at any of the different ways to incorporate the rule structure was we wanted to ask what feels the best out of this scenario, right? What is, we could have done I can draw 2 cards to hand, and then from there, pick only one of those 2 cards to resource. But we kept asking ourselves throughout the process, if I'm the player, and is that the one that I prefer? Is that the direction I want? Or do I want to look at and say, oh no, my entire hand is available for me to be able to react to the situation on the board, to be able to start pre-planning out future events. I want to be able to take that and have full control over what I put down. And that approach really was what we tried to lean into in the design process.
And I can say I actually saw that in play when we went to Europe. So we went and visited a few of our international partners, and we were demoing the game to a select group of people. And it was very interesting because I heard it on a couple occasions where someone would be like, okay, well, what do I do next? And what was your response to them?
What is the thing you want to do? And oftentimes, they would say, I want to do it this way. And I go, good thing, that's the way you do it. So it was really fun to watch that engagement from the high-level design philosophy to be played out, with players who weren't part of that experience. It was fun.
Yeah, because I love it, but I've been through every iteration, so it was a little different for me than it was for them. So
for you, it's a lot of wait, what version?
Right, exactly. Hold on,
always in that space. Yeah.
I know we've done this and this and this and this and this, but it definitely, a little bit partial to the game as a whole, but it is my favorite iteration of the system. I love it. I think it's great. So, all right, cool. So that's the general idea of how resources came to be the way that they are.
Yep.
So let's talk about them a little bit more as we get into gameplay. But before we do that, let's talk about deck building. So obviously it's a TCG. You're going to have a deck. You're going to have a deck of a set number of cards, maybe even.
Yeah.
So what does this look like? What is my deck going to be?
So starting with the basics, it's a 50-card minimum deck. You can build a deck with more than 50 cards if you want. And at most, you can have 3 copies of any specific card in that deck. I know a lot of other games it's 4 copies, but again, in keeping with our theme of we want this game to be a little more accessible and also just have a little more variety, we like the idea of limiting it to 3. You only ever need to chase 3 copies of that rare card if you want a full playset for your deck.
Yes.
And then probably the biggest element that influences your deck building is the aspect system.
Yes. Oh.
So there are 6 aspects in the game: vigilance, aggression, command, cunning, heroism, and villainy.
Yep.
And you're going to your leader and your base are going to provide generally 3 aspects total for your deck. Typically, you'll play cards that match those aspects, and if you do, just play them normally for cost, totally fine. If you want to play a card that doesn't match one of your aspects, you can. You can put any card you want in your deck, but for each aspect you're missing, you have to pay 2 extra, which is a pretty prohibitive cost. In Constructed, very rarely will you ever do that, but you can in some weird, synergy situations. And the big thing is that for draft and sealed, if your draft goes off the rails a little bit, you don't get all the cards you want in your colors, you can always build a legal deck. Sometimes it might even be good for you to say, this card costs 6, but I would play it for 8 in a draft deck.
Yeah, I think the other part of the aspect system that we really tried to capture is the idea that aspects are for these kind of characters, these kind of moment in time experiences, right? Everything about that system is built on the idea that this is one lens into what you're looking at, and there are obviously many different lenses you could use and apply to the various things in the game.
Yeah. So a character at one point in time could be doing something that's very aggression-oriented. At a different point in time, they're much more command-oriented, and we could have different cards that show them in different lights.
Absolutely.
And the other thing we want to highlight is that while mechanically all 6 aspects are the same, it's just, matching aspects to your leader and base, paying extra if you don't have it. The card pool treats them differently. Specifically, heroism and villainy are kind of separate from the other 4.
Yes.
And we can get into the details of that. You've already seen probably some of it in the cards that are spoiled. There are many cards that are either heroism or villainy plus one of the other aspects. So Grand Moff Tarkin unit is command plus villainy. The Yoda unit is vigilance plus heroism.
Yep.
I have to always check myself because in my mind they're just red, blue, yellow, green. Have to use the official names. So there's a lot of that. Also, they don't really mix. Heroism and villainy are separate. Your leader will provide one of those aspects very intentionally. Yes. You don't build a combination hero-villain deck. Your leader will have one of them, either hero or villain. But the bases will always only be one of the other 4 aspects. So you can change what color goes with your Luke leader, whether you want to pair him with command or pair him with cunning or whatnot. But you're never going to be able to pair Luke plus villain.
Yeah, and it's actually, I think that touches really, I think, into some of the philosophy behind the base, right? Like we obviously, you've seen a couple of leaders, and obviously today we saw some of the bases, but the base itself, a lot of times, some of the chatter that I think we've heard is the idea of like, oh, it's just this color, it's just this aspect, that's all it is. That seems so simple. It seems too simplified. The idea, actually, I remember we talked about bases at length. I think it was actually one of the
many versions.
It was one of the things we talked about more than I think almost anything, because of all the different ways in which you could conceive of how to use that space and use that design. And it was only if you remember, actually, there was that point where all of the aspects were on the leader.
Yeah, your leader had all the aspects.
Yep, and there was nothing on the base. And there was this moment of, wait, what if we have something like Luke Skywalker, who is, the leader that we've shown, of course, is a vigilance heroism.
Yeah.
And so that idea that I could play a vigilant heroism aggression Luke Skywalker deck or a vigilant heroism cunning Luke Skywalker deck meant that I could, there's a way to manipulate that. It changes so much in the details that is those two decks play very differently.
Yeah.
And just that simple choice means a ton for the deck building.
Yeah, it opens up so many more deck building options in Constructed. And also it was, I think that was the moment when Draft and Sealed really came into their own, when you could mix and match in Draft. And so you could draft for, I'm drafting around a leader that's this color, but I know that I can also bring in a base of a different color depending on what comes my way in the draft. And another thing to talk about, maybe briefly touch on, is there are some cards that have two of the same aspect icon, and that's another element where you could choose to pair your Vigilance Luke with a base that also gives you a Vigilance icon to double up and get access to some of those cards that have two icons of the same color on them. And those cards, there aren't a ton of them floating around, but if you get access to them, they can be pretty powerful. So it's just another choice of whether you want that third color or you want to double up to get access to those powerful cards.
Well, I think it's important to note there too, right? It's not just that you have a color. If it's somewhere on your aspect color pattern that you're going to use, you can get the card at a discount or at no extra cost. Not a discount. The idea being that you need to have, if you want to play a double vigilant card, you need to show two vigilant aspect icons on your base and leader, or you're going to pay extra for that second vigilant icon.
Yeah, so it was really, just we wanted even more options, really, of whether you went more colors or fewer colors, and more cool choices to make there.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's cool having those double aspect cards, because you're really focusing your deck around that aspect. Like, you are hyper vigilant and your deck shows it. And I think that it's really cool thematically how that all comes back together.
Yeah.
So cool. Well, we know a bit about deck building. I know we touched on it briefly on the last stream, but let's talk just a little bit more about the types of cards that we're going to find in our decks.
Oh, sure, yeah. So we obviously talked about the leader and base already, which start the game and play, stay and play throughout the game. In your deck, you're going to have 3 different card types. The first, and the one that will probably make up the majority of your deck, is units. They're the ones that engage in combat, help you actually win the game. And I think the big thing to talk about with units is just, we touched on this again in the last stream, but the space versus ground arena. And the choice there of how many space units to put in your deck versus ground units as you're choosing which cards to keep in your hand and which cards to play each round, whether you focus more on space or ground. It's a huge part of the strategy of the game, is deciding where to focus there. And another thing we can talk about is we also went through a lot of iterations, and people might have noticed already in some of the cards we previewed, that in general, there are more ground units floating around, and ground units have slightly better stats for their cost than space units. We tried versions, many iterations, where it's much more 50-50, just like space and ground were sort of the same. And it didn't feel right in play. It didn't feel like there was a meaningful difference between space and ground, and it felt like the temptation was just, well, I'll just throw everything in one arena. They're pretty much the same anyway.
Yeah, there was a lot of, I think, there's that consideration when dealing with a two-lane system, where you want to try to find the equal balance to make them, to, like you said, 50-50. But I think that in order to give the experience, we've talked about how I think as soon as we split the space, the ground and the space into separate arenas, I think one of the first things we said was, well, what if I just build all space and you only build all ground, and we just pass each other? What does that, that experience doesn't feel great.
Right.
So how can we kind of think about what makes space unique? What's a different way to approach that as opposed to just splitting it as a 50-50 lane split?
Yeah, and it really plays out in very interesting ways in the metagame that we've seen in playtesting, where because there are so many ground units, so many cool abilities on your ground units, pretty much every deck is going to have some presence on the ground. And then how the degree to which you go into space really shapes your deck. Despite having lower stats, some of the best aggressive decks are focused more heavily on space because they know that's where there are fewer defenses, right? Like, my opponent's definitely going to have stuff to defend on the ground. They might not have as much in space, so maybe I go there to try and sneak by my opponent.
I don't know. I'll have one ship that I'm not going to talk about because I don't want to provide any spoilers. But I'm going to have that one ship in space. You both know which one it is.
I do. I absolutely do.
It'll take good
Every
care
deck.
of me. It'll take good care of me.
That's a good one. So yeah, I guess that's mostly what we wanted to talk about with units. We can move on to upgrades, which we haven't talked so much about.
No, I don't. I think we only mentioned it in the last year.
Yeah,
We didn't have
just
any
briefly
examples at the
alluded to
time.
it.
Yep, and now there's an example in the Quickstart, and we've got the art pieces behind Danny's
I
head.
will
over
say
here.
some people did notice that.
Yep,
I
some
saw
people
chatter
caught it.
around
Yep.
that were like, wait a second,
Yep.
there was art back there that we haven't seen. Very, very good eagle eyes.
Yeah, so I see Vader's lightsaber is the example we're showing now. And upgrades, as you might expect, they're attachments that you put on your unit to make your unit stronger in some way. You see, again, the lightsaber gives extra power and HP to the attached unit. And of course, being Vader's lightsaber gives an even bigger bonus if you play it attached to Darth Vader.
Right, because the cell block guard holding Vader's lightsaber, he's just not going to use it the same way.
Exactly. He can
As
pick up a
Vader would.
lightsaber, he can do something with it,
Right,
but
right.
he's not going to use it as well as Vader does.
Very true. Yeah, and I think there was some. I think we were always inspired by. I mean, I think I've played every version of a Star Wars card game that's existed on the market up to this point. I know you've played a bunch.
Yeah.
I think that the team in general are all fans of a lot of the games that have come in past. And these kinds of things, like Vader's lightsaber, do this kind of homage to that experience in some ways. And I think that's an important, like, there's kind of a tip of the hat, if you will, to the idea that, like, we are all fans of the way these games interact and the way that they have in the past. And the idea that, like, Vader's lightsaber in Vader's hand should be meaningfully different than in anyone else's. Like, I loved that aspect of the game.
Yeah. And then finally, the last card type in your deck is events. These are just one-time use cards. You play them, they do something to the game, and then you discard them. Our example here is Vanquish. Really impactful card. It can just defeat any non-leader unit. Again, a great answer if your opponent has something really big that you can't deal with by attacking with your own units. One thing to touch on that people have, I think, noticed probably already is the graphic design choices you made with these different card types.
Yes.
So you'll see events have their art on the bottom. And that was something we talked about, went back and forth about a lot. But ultimately, we felt like it was going to be very helpful, especially to newer players just learning the game, to have an immediate visual indicator that, oh, these cards are different. These cards don't stay in play, whereas the cards, the upgrades, and the units that have art at the top are the ones that stick around and stay in play.
Yes.
And it also extends onto the leaders and the bases, where those are horizontal. Again, as a quick visual reminder that those are the games that start the game in play.
Yep.
Yeah. And then maybe the last thing to talk about, just briefly, when we're talking about card types, is token cards. Again, the rules mentioned, there are 2 types of token cards in set 1. And these are, if you've played with tokens before in other games, they start outside of your deck. There will be card abilities that create them. For instance, Luke Skywalker Leader puts a shield token onto one of your units. You just grab that shield upgrade card, attach it to your unit just as if it were a regular upgrade. Yeah, and the card, I mean, I really like having them as cards and treating them as upgrades. It gives meaningful ways to interact with them in the card pool.
Yep, we're going to say the same thing. You take it.
You go ahead.
No,
you
you
go
take
ahead.
it.
I was just going to say, I know that we have a reputation of creating lots of different tokens as FFG, and I think that it was an intentional choice to try to limit the amount of actual physical punch board or other counter tokens and lean more into this idea that we can expand this way instead.
And it's also, it was something we talked about a lot too, of just keeping the board state clean,
yes.
Where with the tokens being cards, you know that the only like little punch counters that are ever going on your units are going to be damage.
Yep.
And so it's always very clear, like, oh, there's 4 counters, and like, oh, they're all damage, of course. If it's a token, it's going to be that upgrade card.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll agree with you both to a point. Our fans do love our FFG tokens.
Absolutely.
So for OP, I promise you all right now that there will be tokens at some point. I will make that happen. They want to keep the space less cluttered. I'm going to clutter your space so much. But yes, that's one beautiful thing about the tokens too, is like, I mean, you've touched on it with draft and sealed, like everything comes from the packs.
Yes.
right? Those tokens are in the pack. You don't have to go and pick something else up or bring a bunch of other things to then play the game.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Everything is just right there.
Yeah, actually, I saw a question that came out after we released the rules this morning. Someone asked on the Discord whether or not we were going to have some form of like draft product that was going to be required. Absolutely not. In case it wasn't clear, I saw many people jump to talk about it, but absolutely not.
Yep.
This is fully, all of our limited play is done exclusively through our booster products. That was, again, very intentional, designed from the beginning. We thought long and hard about how that would affect the experience, and it was a requirement from pretty much day one from both Danny and I.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's great. Thank you
Yes.
both. You're rock stars. All right. So that's enough about my deck. Now I need to know how to play the game.
Yeah.
So what does our round structure look like as we're setting up and then playing and then continuing that?
So to start, I guess, with setup at the beginning of the game, you're going to draw 6 cards and then choose 2 of them to put into play face down as resources, ready resources.
Ready resources.
Yeah, no, that was a question that came up as well.
Yep.
The resources at the start of the game are ready. You can play things on the first turn. And as Jim already touched a bit on why we went with 2 resources in play at the start, just gets you into the action faster, makes you feel like you're going back and forth right from the beginning of the game. And again, of course, your base and leader will start the game in play as well. So even if you're not, playing 2 resources worth of cards in your first turn, maybe you're also using your leader's ability. There's a lot of options right from the start.
Cool.
And then once you're done setting up, you dive right into the action phase, and that's where really the vast majority of the game takes place.
Yep,
it's the heart of the
course.
game. And the big thing to talk about there is that it's you and your opponent going back and forth, each taking 1 action at a time. And that was, again, we tried a lot of variations of how the round structure worked, but this is the one that felt the best. It felt the most like we are engaged, we are both doing things. I'm not sitting here waiting for my opponent to finish what they're doing. I can react to what is going on the other side of the board immediately.
Well, it creates that dynamic where every choice you have to make is done in real time, right? It's not like I can sit and plan out a string of moves that are going to have all these kind of rippling effects. I have to worry about, I might have an entire, a plan. I look at my hand, it's the start of the round, and we go and say, okay, this is my plan this round. I'm going to play this card on the, first. I'm going to do this action next. And then the minute your opponent plays a card you weren't expecting, now your entire dynamic of that round has changed.
Yeah,
I think that's happened a couple times, Josh.
Oh, once or 100 times. Yeah, somewhere between there.
Yeah. It's amazing how much one action by your opponent can completely derail what your plan was for the turn.
Yeah, but it keeps everybody so engaged.
It does.
That's what I love about it. Like, I mean, we've talked about it on the last stream. You just mentioned it again. Like, I don't want to sit and wait for my opponent to just do all of the things they can do. I want to be able to interact with my opponent, right? It's not a one-player game.
Yep.
I'm sitting across the table from somebody. Why am I not interacting with them? And this game just throws all of the other games' ideas out the window and allows you to have that engagement.
Yeah, I think it's something I touched on in the last stream too, but just how vital sequencing your actions is to the strategy of the game as well, where there have been so many times where I thought I had a great plan, and then I realized, oh no, I was supposed to take that other action first.
Right.
That cost me, 5 damage on my base or something.
Yep.
And another element to it too is the initiative, which we talk about really quickly. Once per round, one player can take the initiative, meaning they pass for the rest of the round, but they get to go first next round. And a lot of times, especially early in the game, it's just, I'm out of things to do, I'll take the initiative. But as the game goes on, there are a lot of spots where it becomes a really interesting tactical decision of, do I want to attack with a small unit right now? Or do I want to skip that action so I can go first next round and do something really huge and high impact on the next turn?
Like dropping that Vanquish on the big unit that
Exactly.
somebody just dropped on the other side of the board, right?
Yes.
I need to do that before that unit attacks. So
I cannot count the number of times I've taken an action to heal 1 damage from my base and then immediately realized, by giving my opponent initiative, they're going to deal like 6 damage to my base on their first action.
Totally worth
Probably
that
a
one.
mistake.
Totally worth
Yeah.
that one.
It's only worth -5. It's fine.
Yeah, it really that initiative choice is so key, especially as you start getting into the leader deploy range, right? When you start looking and saying, okay, now next round, Leia's going to be able to deploy, and I need to be able to prepare for that. I want to have first action, knowing that that's going to happen, or maybe you don't want that first action, and that also leads to that idea of the timing of the leader deployment is key.
So big. So big. So your leader deploying, if we haven't covered it before, they flip over, they come into play as a unit, and they come into play ready, which means they can attack that same round. It's a huge moment in the game. It can completely swing the tide of a battle. Leia is the example we have up on the screen, I think, and she comes in 3/6 that gets +1 power when she's attacking. Attack for 4 out of nowhere, that's can be pretty big to change the board. But it's also something you have to be careful of, because if you do it at the wrong moment, maybe your opponent just, boom, defeats your leader within 2 actions or something, and you're like, oh, I'm done. That's it. Don't have my leader deploy for the rest of the game.
Yeah, and it's good to know, obviously, right? The idea was, when we talked about leader philosophy at the last stream, this idea of your leader is always in play, it's always affecting your game states. It's always something you can draw on, whether or not they're on the board deployed or back, right?
You still have their undeployed side.
You still get their undeployed side, but yeah, it is that you get that one time. When is the leader coming in, making this big, hopefully big impact, and then are out there to maybe finish out the game or do enough to where you feel it. So yeah, bringing the leader out and then having it immediately get bounced back is you got to pay attention.
The difference
to not
between having
let that
the leader
happen.
in play for multiple rounds versus just a single round is massive.
Significant.
Yep.
Also a question coming in about...
We do have a couple questions, but I think we should get to those after we finish. We're so close to the round structure being done,
right.
So let's finish that, and then, we'll jump into a couple questions.
What I just heard was Josh wants us to stop talking to everybody. I'm just playing, Josh.
I'm telling you to continue talking.
No, absolutely.
At least he's not telling anybody to kill me like previous streams.
So I guess, that mostly covered the action phase.
Right.
We
So
can talk
you
about
talked
the
about
regroup
initiative,
phase.
right?
Yes.
Claiming the initiative. Once that's done, that person's done. The
And
next
then
person.
The next person can keep taking actions, but eventually they're going to pass.
Yep.
And at that point, when both players have passed and or taken initiative, we go on to the regroup phase. First step of the regroup phase is draw 2 cards. Draw 2, importantly, not 1.
Yes, not
Again,
one.
we
Yes.
tested both ways.
What would you rather do? Draw 1 card or draw 2 cards?
Can I have 2, please?
Turns out 2 is the better option.
Thank you.
And then, as Jim alluded to, choose any of the cards in your hand, not just the 2 you drew, to put into play as a resource.
Yes.
This gives you so much control over shaping your hand over the course of a game. Again, I talked about actions being a huge part of the strategy. The decision of what to put down as a resource versus what to keep, equally as important. It's such a tough decision sometimes, thinking like, do I keep this card that will be great in a few turns, or do I, get rid of it now, maybe regret it later? It's agonizing at times. But it gives you so much consistency, so much control over how your game is going to play out.
Right. But if you also just draw cards you want, you don't have to resource at this point.
That's true.
The only time you're required to resource is at
The 2 at the start of the game.
2 at the start of the game.
So that's a big thing when you're building your deck too.
Yeah.
A lot of decks plan on, I'm going to get to 5 resources and then just keep 2 every turn.
Yep.
Get ahead of my opponent on card advantage, but they'll get to play more expensive things, obviously.
Yeah.
And again, that was what feels good. For a while, it was required to put down a resource, and we played a lot of games and said, wouldn't it be nice if you didn't
Just
have to
stop.
put down your really good card?
Yep.
So it's a lot of fun, and again, it adds to that deck building strategy and that in-game strategy as well.
Well, and a lot of the testing, I think there's this really nice flow that happens where it goes, you start off the beginning of the game, and because you're, drawing 2, you're putting 1 down, it's really, your hand starts to deplete over those first couple of rounds. And then just as you're about to be out of cards, a lot of times this natural kind of flow back to now I can keep 2 every round and the kind of play out the end state of the game feels really good.
And it kind of ebbs and flows too. There's a lot of games where you'll start drawing 2 every round, and then suddenly you have a bunch of cards in hand, and you're like, oh wait, maybe this round I should put down a resource so I can actually start playing these again.
Yep.
Yeah. And then finally, of course, you ready all your cards, your resources, your units, your leader, so that they are ready to use in the next round. And that's pretty much it. That's a round.
Sweet. Sounds easy enough.
Yeah.
Super easy.
Yeah, barely an inconvenience. All right, so before we get into the questions, I do want to also just throw out a note that everything that we've talked about today is from the Quickstart rules.
Yes.
Specifically the Quickstart rules. These are designed to be very easy to read and understand for newer players. Obviously, we're going to have more.
Yeah, we are well aware this is a trading card game that's going to have a huge, ever-expanding card pool. We are going to run into complex rule situations. So we're going to have a much deeper, more complex, more robust online rules reference that will cover all those corner case interactions and things that aren't covered in the very basic Quickstart. As Josh said, the Quickstart is just to get you playing right from the jump.
Yep. Sweet. So we have a few questions.
Yes.
I'm going to refer to them really quickly. Okay, there we go. So, do you and your opponent have to agree on which side is space and which side is ground? And what I'm going to say before you answer the question the correct way is if you are ever playing against me, your ground units go to your left. Because my ground units have to go to my right. Otherwise, I just get so lost and I'm starting to put cards down on the wrong side. So yes, playing against me, always left. What's the real answer?
The real answer is the first person to play a unit gets to decide which side is space and which side is ground, and then the other player has to mirror them. So that space is all on one side, ground is all on the other.
Yeah, we looked at, like, there was that weirdness where when we made that choice and started thinking about it of like, wait, if we want to always put it on one side, then it's not going to mirror that way. So then we're going to be on opposite sides. That doesn't make sense. But then how do we determine who gets to? It again, in a way, sometimes that just happens. You go, well, I guess the simplest way is whoever puts the first card down is determined. Well, you played a ground unit on the right side. Now you have to play your ground units on the left, Josh. Sorry.
Yeah.
I quit. I'm out. I'll take the L and let's start a new game where I get to go first. That all being said, though, if you're sitting down with somebody and you want to play the game and just say, hey, ground units on this side of the table, that's fine too. This is the ruling specifically, but you can make that decision beforehand if you'd like.
Yeah.
Another question that was asked was regarding bases. They've seen a select number of bases so far, and they're just wondering if there might be more than that.
Whoa, we're going into, we're really trying to go into spoiler territory here?
I mean, we don't have
we
to
can
really
say-
talk too deep
Yeah.
about them, but
We can probably say there are more than 4 bases in set 1.
yes,
Yeah.
there are more
That's all
than
you're going
4.
to get?
Yep,
But
yep.
there are more than 4?
Yep, that's a good non-answer.
I mean, it wasn't
I mean,
an answer. The
technically it was an
question
answer.
was,
Yeah.
are there more than 4?
Are there more than 4?
Yes.
Yes. The answer is yes. I also think I saw a question come through about like what with space and ground, why we didn't just do like where the X-wings are flying versus the ground units. And I think part of that is it's a very different dynamic because space and ground under normal circumstances have no way to interact with each other in a way that a single lane game allows that interaction, right?
Yeah.
So it felt very much like we wanted to identify that very unique interaction space. I think also it has the added benefit of, giving the thematic nature of defining these two very Star Wars feeling arenas and lending that kind of, again, we talked about it in the last live stream, a little bit of that simulationist lean.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, how many times have you seen a stormtrooper shoot at the Falcon and it does nothing? Like, silly for them to be together.
Yeah.
All right. So next question that came through, and this one, I'm interested to see. I think I know what the answer will be, but it varies so much. But in typical testing, like what is the timeline that this is, or how long will a game take? I guess is the better way to word that.
Time.
Yeah.
Real time.
Yeah. How long does a game actually take to play?
Yeah, as you say, it can vary a lot depending on what archetypes and kind of decks people are playing. And also, your first games obviously are going to take longer as you're learning the cards. But
course.
with experienced players in our playtesting, typical games are between 10 and 20 minutes. I have played plenty of aggro games where somebody gets run over and it's 5 to 10 minutes. I've also played like some grindy mirror matches that go on for over half an hour. Like it's a trading card game. People can build decks in very different ways, and certain matchups are going to take a long time. Certain matchups are going to be short, but yeah, typically 10 to 20 minutes, depending on deck, depending on players. But yeah, I mean, I play fast as well, so I play like 4 or 5 games in an hour very frequently. But yeah, as you said, it varies a lot.
Yeah, I can usually pull, because I'm not quite as fast of a player as you are, Danny, so I typically get in when we're not playing, usually like a 10 to 20 minute, so I can usually get 3 games in an hour. It's pretty.
Yeah, I think
I fall into that
a
category.
Pretty standard average. Most people play about that many with an average deck.
I'm lucky to get 1 an hour. Not really. I do typically play very slow, like very defensive style, but I would say my average is still probably 15.
Yeah,
minutes,
and like 10 minutes of that is Josh arguing about which side should be ground versus 6.
9 minutes tops.
Fair.
I'm going to time it next time and cap you.
Okay.
9 minutes.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. And if I have to switch sides of the table, I'll play your deck so it's on the right side. I don't care. I'm getting the right side to be ground. All right, great. So, I don't see any other questions that have been thrown up as of right now. We talked about the Quickstart being the Quickstart, obviously, what we've talked about today. We talked a little bit about Draft and Sealed and how that's all tying into this. The Quickstart is very obviously talking about the 1v1 constructed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think we should clarify that the deck building rules in the Quickstart are for 1v1 constructed.
Yes.
We'll learn more about Draft Seal multiplayer in the future.
Yep. Yeah. So we will talk a lot more about that, just not today. And I lied about being out of questions. So we're not going to get into details. I'm going to throw out the question still, just so that people know that we're aware that they want to know.
Yep.
But we're not really going to get into it. The question was asked if the Leia leader and the Leia leader unit and a Leia unit can be played at the same time. And there are some interactions that we will have with uniqueness in this game. We will talk to you more about that later. We are not really going to get too deep into it today. Does that work?
Okay, yeah.
Does that work?
I'm happy to talk about it later.
Danny wants to talk about it right now.
I mean, we want to talk about it right now, but I don't need any more threats. So, yes, not today is somehow the next question. Interesting. All right, great. So, unless another question pops up, let's wrap this up by talking about us providing this today for a specific reason.
Yep, absolutely. With the plan being that, I think we're going to be playing the game soon with people, right?
Yeah, we're going somewhere. In just over a month.
Gosh, is it already only?
It's already, I know, it's so close.
Thanks for that.
Sorry. So yes, one of the reasons that we wanted to get this to you now was to make sure that those of you who are coming to Gen Con have an idea how to play the game before just showing up. We want to make sure that we're providing an easy experience for those that are coming to demo the game, and we're very, very excited for those that can make it out to Gen Con. And to see you, obviously, come chat with us. We are all going to be there. But yeah, we wanted to make sure that you had this. With that, though, I'm going to throw this out there. I didn't get approval for this, but I'm going to do it anyways. This is the English language version. And this is the first one we are launching because the first time we're showing the game is at Gen Con. There will be other versions coming out for our localized Quickstart rules. So, yeah, just wanted to let everybody know that if you're going to spend some time maybe translating it yourself, you might not have to. So that is all I have. I don't know if you guys had anything else you wanted to add.
From my perspective, it really is just keep up the awesome content that all of you are putting out. And very much enjoy watching it and engaging with it, listening to it. Absolutely.
Yep. Being the fly on the wall most of the time, but
yes,
it's fun.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You can find me in Discord if you are observant. I'm there. I'm there clearly.
And I'm the creepy bearded baby, so you might say. All right. Well, great. Well, thank you both for being here again. I'm excited to do more of these with the two of you, and maybe we'll even spice it up with a couple of the other devs at one of these points. But thank you to all of you as well for being here. You guys are awesome, and we look forward to chatting with you next time. Bye.